Hello, hello. Happy new moon and welcome to Wisdom Circle's discussions on menopause, transition, and other informative, humorous, empowering, sometimes humbling, and often ridiculous stories about aging. My name is Laura Libby, aka Burlesque Sensation Ophelia Flame, and I'm excited and honored to be your host for these lovely, informative discussions. Today, we're going to feature a beloved friend and a wealth of knowledge, licensed acupuncturist and certified hormone specialist, Stacey Degen. But first, I'd like to share a little bit about how we got to this very moment. So, in addition to being a burlesque performer and instructor for the last 30 years, I'm also a group fitness instructor and a massage therapist. But despite my love of anatomy and physiology and what I felt was a deep connection to body awareness, my menopause transition has been a confusing experience with a myriad of symptoms ranging from mild to extreme that have been ignored or just misdiagnosed by uninformed medical professionals. And oddly, no one that I know, and I mean no one, I knew was really talking about it. So because you don't know what you don't know, I just pressed on while my symptoms worsened. And suddenly my whole life turned upside down. And I felt like I was literally and figuratively just slowly disappearing. What I didn't know then was this is really a common and powerful feeling during menopause transition. And the reason so many of us are in the dark about this huge life changing event involving our very own bodies has a long history of gatekeeping, misogyny, misinformation, and just shame and fear. So now, 8 years into my own menopause journey roller coaster, I'm inspired to redefine and demystify aging by empowering women to be seen and heard while finding confidence and pleasure in living at any age. I'm currently studying to become a certified menopause support coach through Burl Education and creating my own program I plan to launch in 2023. To clarify, these discussions are for anyone at any age, assigned an ovarian system and the folks that love them. By sharing our stories and inherent wisdom, our open discussions build knowledge, offer tools, resources, and support so we can better navigate our own experiences. And with an estimated 1.1 million women entering into menopause transition annually just in the US alone, there's probably a good chance that you or somebody that you might know have some pressing questions and even some concerns about this physiological, biological, cultural, familial, and spiritual rite of passage. Menopause is a powerful life change and is not a disease or an affliction. So let's do a little bit of vocabulary since there is a lot of misunderstanding out there, just so we're all on the same page. And generally, as a generalized average, most people begin perimenopause around 45. But it's completely different for every person based on your personal health history or even including mental health, such as childhood trauma and PTSD. This is when your hormones begin to shift and the changes are usually gradual. Symptoms can include, but are not limited to, and hopefully not all at the same time, irregular periods, hot flashes or flushes, chills, night sweats, mood swings, weight gain, particularly around the midsection, slowed metabolism, fatigue, insomnia, brain fog, anxiety, irritability, moodiness, rage, and my personal favorite, vaginal dryness. It sounds like a real big party, a real awesome party, doesn't it? No, not really. But it can be. Menopause, when it's been 365 days since you've had a period and the ovaries are going into retirement, that either that be that on their own or suddenly that can be at any age by ways of surgery such as a hysterectomy, oophorectomy, or medical treatments such as chemotherapy for cancer. But if you get a period, it's back to the drawing board. But once the shift happens, you may still experience symptoms, but they usually begin to lessen. Post-menopause, the promised land, that is when we settle into our new transformative selves, living the next hopefully 20 to 40 years. And menopause transition is the term used for the whole wild ride. Now, we're going to also talk a little bit, I'm sure, today about hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. These are the terms that are used as either synthetic or bioidentical hormones prescribed by a doctor to help people transition and or ease symptoms such as hot flashes or night sweats. And although HRT is most certainly not for everyone, it can really be supportive for bone health and for cardiovascular health. Heads up, this is a highly debated topic. So this evening, we're going to hear about our guest's journey, but also about some helpful solutions to help support your or someone you love's journey. We welcome your questions and comments following what I imagine is going to be an informative discussion. So without further ado, after 30 years of passionately working in various health and wellness sectors in the Eastern and Western medicine, Stacey Degen's career as a natural healthcare provider brought her to a pivotal point in her career of supporting women's health, midlife, and beyond. Going through the stages of menopause herself and struggling to find resources that could support this challenging transition sparked a commitment and a passion to change the negative stigma of menopause. Offering safe natural health care based on science, experience, and collaboration with Western medical doctors, and bringing passion and purpose to women through this transition is the focus of her new budding project, Second Spring by Stacey. Today's conversation will help to integrate the Eastern medical paradigm to support you in how we think, how we move, how we eat, and how we sleep through menopause transition supported by acupuncture, therapeutic movement, herbal medicine, and nutrition. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Stacey Degen. Say hello. Maybe.
Hello, everyone.
There she is. Stacey, I know
Hello. Yeah,
we'll bring your camera back on here. But
there we
while we're
are.
working on that, Stacey, you and I have had I'm so happy and so honored and excited to have you here. And we have had lots of time to discuss our passion for bodies and healing. And I'd love to start by just hearing more about your personal experience regarding your own personal menopause journey. So, like, how old were you? What were your symptoms? How did it begin?
Thank you for having me, and thanks for joining, everyone. For sure. I mean, the topic of Chinese medicine and as it applies to anything is always my favorite to talk about, discuss, suss out, all that good stuff. So I'm super happy to be here and share any nuggets that I can possibly share and set forth some inspiration, hopefully, for finding some really tangible, easy ways to really embrace this time in our lives. So for me, my journey, I'm still deep in it. I'm 51 years old. I'll be 52 in a month. And, I'm still really working through it. I'm still trying to understand my body and get to know myself at this stage in my life. But now looking back, in hindsight, I actually did not know at the time exactly what was happening, but I was about 43 when I started, when I look back now and started noticing some symptoms and some changing in my body. And, for me, much like most of us ladies out there, I chalked it off as stress. I was moving from the West Coast back to the Midwest. I was closing down one practice and one practice in Portland, Oregon, and I was opening up another practice and trying to reestablish my life here in Minneapolis. And so there was just a lot of really big things happening in my life at that time. So I think I chalked it off as, well, it's stress. And, it's what a lot of us do. As my symptoms started really getting a lot more clear, and especially, I mean, I do this stuff every day. I talk to women about their hormones. And even with that, I still didn't understand what was going on with me, which I found very unnerving and very frightening, to be totally honest, when it all clicked. And I also had a very interesting situation happened. My main symptoms were absolutely crippling fatigue, to the point where it was almost difficult, if not impossible, at some days to get through a work day. And I've always been a very active, very energetic person. So this was very difficult and very foreign for me. It then extended into really deep-seated joint pain and muscle pain. And again, I've always been I've been an athlete my whole life. I live in my body, so that was very disturbing and unnerving for me. And then really moving into some of the more traditional things, my cycle started changing. I was having really heavy periods, lots of clotting, lots of discomfort, and a lot of emotional stuff connected to that. And then that's when I really started putting the picture together, like, okay, there's something more going on here. So in the meantime, I was also going through all of that. I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme's disease, and it was actually a functional medicine physician, and I will describe what that means in just a second for those that don't know, who ultimately brought forth this chronic Lyme's disease diagnosis. Then also I had a lot of blood work done, the famous Dutch test. And for those of you that don't know, it's a urine test that gives massive amounts of markers on not only what phases your hormones are going through your body, but also how much you have and how much you don't have. So through that whole journey, I was diagnosed with Lyme's disease. I was treated for that. And then this functional medicine physician who I've worked with off and on over the years was able to really start helping me explore bioidenticals and all those fun things, hormone replacement therapy, supplements, dietary, lifestyle, movement, things like that, that helped me with my journey. So that's kind of the gist of it. I'm 3 years now post-menopausal, so I'm in the promised land. And when I say that, I think we all giggle and laugh about that because, like, how could that be possible? But the thing that I'm so passionate about sharing with women that I work with is that there is a different place that we get to. And if we can really surround ourselves with some qualified providers and create a team of resources around us, it really does lighten the load and helps the journey just become much more tangible. And we can get there. So, again, I had an acupuncturist that I worked with diligently. It was actually a male acupuncturist who's just over the top amazing. I mean, I told him for, 2 years, Brian, you are saving my life. And I do believe that. And then this functional medicine physician who is a trained medical doctor that focuses on using much deeper levels of diagnostics than we get in the traditional medical model, the modern medical model. So they're very different than I'm sure a lot of our experiences of going to our traditional primary care physician or gynecologist that we've worked with for years and explaining how we're feeling, and then being like, well, you're probably in menopause and here's what the options are: antidepressant, IUD for heavy bleeding. And again, I'm not putting any of those down because those are also really great resources for different people at different times in their life. But if that is not you, or your symptoms aren't really matching what that has to offer, it's a really difficult road until you can find a provider and a group of people that can surround you and give you those resources that you need. So here I am today on the other side of that real intense, active perimenopausal into menopause situation and feeling a lot better. I'm happy to report I can get through a day of work. And if I'm lucky, come home and still have enough energy to, walk my dog, exercise, do yoga, be with my family, whatever it is. So long story, but
I
yes.
know, but it's so important, Stacey. And, you and I have shared this before too, that, there's, when I was laughing as I was reading the symptoms of menopause, and there's so much just like, oh, it's the worst and it's terrible. And, but there are really so many beautiful, it's such an incredible opportunity for personal growth, self-reflection. My experience mirrored yours similarly, that I had all of these things, but I thought it was stress, and I did all these things to try to remedy the stress, and it got worse. And so And it can be scary, especially when you don't have the information. You don't even know the questions to ask. I had to see went to see my I had a pap and went to see my OB, and she said, literally the only thing she said was, "Do you have any vaginal dryness?" And I said no, and she said, "Well, let me know if you do, because there's a cream for that." Like, I I mean, yes, and there's so much more. And it is so it's such a you everyone's journey is just unique in its own way, and it feels very isolating and alone. But you're not. And I think that, like, finding your right people to sort of hold your hand to get to the other side, which is, I'm sure you can share lots of stories about postmenopausal women who are just like living their best life. So it's a journey. It's sort of a hit or miss, and but we get there, and when we do it, it's cool in our own way. Anyway,
Yes.
that
It
makes sense.
absolutely is. I couldn't agree with that more. And to circle back on that reflection of the self-reflection and the opportunities that do exist within this space, because again, our physical body is literally slowing us down. Like, we cannot continue to trick ourselves to forge forward the ways we always have, because those tricks don't work anymore. And, the menopausal, uh, the real things happen. As we age, we lose estrogen, we lose elasticity, we lose connective tissue, we lose muscle mass. So it's just all these things that as a younger person we rely so heavily on are just physically not as they're not as available. And so we have to recognize what that means and how that looks and how that is going to, continue to look throughout our lives. So it is really important, though, to remembering that within those struggles are these beautiful gifts and this slowing down period and this time for reflection.
Yeah, yeah. And the real importance, I think, of also something, we're not really conditioned or taught the importance of rest, and what rest really, really truly is, and how deeply it's needed for our bodies. Someone, I don't remember, recently said that, like, all women every person should have a sabbatical at like age 50. Like, you get a year off to just, like, a whole year. You don't have to work. People are going to take care of you. You're just going to rest, take care of yourself, journal, read, walk, Wouldn't
Take
that
a
be
nap.
take
Yep.
a nap, lots of naps. Like,
Lots
I
of
mean,
naps.
the world
Yeah.
would be a lot different, not a lot different place, I think.
It would be.
Yeah.
It absolutely would be. And unfortunately, our culture, the modern Western culture does zero to support that. Zero. In
Yeah.
fact, everything you just said is completely discouraged and looked down upon. Like, oh, where's your to-do
Especially
list?
at that age. I mean, the timing couldn't be worse, quite
Couldn't be
honestly.
worse. Yep.
So I was reading about, it's the 40s is like, we as women, we're like the meat in the middle, right? We're often, we're, at the top of our business, life, we're work life, we're, have a household, we're raising children, and even maybe helping aging parents, so much is put on us on that time of our life. And like, rest seems like the last thing that we can make time for ourselves to do, but we can.
We can.
We
And we
can,
have to.
and we have
Yep.
to. It's
We
important.
have to. Yep.
Well, tell us a little bit about what are the qualifications of becoming an acupuncturist? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about just like the cultural difference between, we were started going down that road, the cultural differences between Eastern and Western approaches to menopause.
Yeah. So, to become a licensed acupuncturist, and there's a varying degree of how people come out into this profession now. It's changed drastically. I've been practicing for over a decade, I think like 14 years ish by now. So, it's very different, but you do have to have a Bachelor of Science or comparable to start to get into a master's program in acupuncture and oriental medicine. The program can run anywhere from 3 years if you go really quickly. Most commonly, it's 4 years and up to 5 if you're coming out with your doctorate. You can also, it's a dual degree of studying just acupuncture, or it's acupuncture and oriental medicine, which encompasses all of the herbal, the natural medicine, the traditional medicine behind that. And then most traditionally, and then coming out of school, you have between 4 and 5 national board exams that you have to pass. And then wherever you're practicing, whatever state you're in has specific that licensing, requirements, but all you have to be licensed through the medical board of whatever state you're practicing in. And then from there, really most acupuncturists, myself, my particular journey and interest has always been in orthopedic, rehab, pain, musculoskeletal, and sports medicine. And when I say sports medicine, I don't mean elite athletes, even though I have had quite an interesting time working with some very high level athletes. That's not my jam. My jam is really just to work with the aging body. People who want to stay active. And that means walking, that means swimming, that means doing yoga. It doesn't have to be an elite, so that's always been my passion. And women's health, definitely. And then again, through my own journey through menopause and just having really, really minimal resources just completely inspired me to want to then deepen my journey. So my journey has included a master's course in traditional Chinese medicine, specifically for the menopause time, perimenopause into menopausal life. And then really when we did kind of start going down that road of what are the differences, right? And I think you said a really important thing, Laura, on, culturally, how are things embraced? And we also have to remember that any of the East Asian cultures have also moved very quickly into a modern world. Traditionally, there has been a lot more honor and, just kind of women have been in a very, very important role in the aging process in traditional cultures, from India to Nepal to China to Japan. I mean, the aging process is actually a very coveted thing. Women are put in a place of power and a place of wisdom and a place of mentorship for, their communities. And, we have the exact opposite here. We get older and no one wants to talk to us anymore, or, we're not as beautiful and we have all these wrinkles and we're trying to get them all fixed. And we're trying to keep up with this and cultivate this image that is just not possible for the aging woman. So, it's really difficult. And then you get into the healthcare system. And I think this is where culturally it's very different, because even in today in India, in China, in Japan, in the East Asian cultures, there is modern medicine, obviously, but there's also the traditional healers. And that system is still just as important. So women are able to seek herbal formulas for any hormonal issues from the time that they're childbearing years all the way through their menopausal years. They're able to go and be surrounded and supported by that. And that's very normal in any of the East Asian cultures. And, we're getting more familiar, obviously, about menopause, what it means, the wisdom and the power behind it. And that's really important. I mean, the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation today and anybody showed up and wants to hear about what traditional Chinese medicine's place in the menopausal journey is really important. So I think those things are changing. But again, yes, they're changing. Yeah. And they're developing and they're evolving. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about this before, that the most of the boomer generation, they've all transitioned through, and now it's Gen X that's sort of rolling into menopause. And not surprising, grumpy old punk rock Gen X is like, what is this shit? Like, what? Why did nobody ever tell me? It's so it can be so harsh and blindsiding. And I agree with you completely. Much of the reason that there is so much lack of knowledge is really steeped in this sort of fear and shame idea around aging. And so I'm really excited and optimistic that, it is this generation that is going to be making these changes now, the women who are rolling into menopause. So so the our daughters and granddaughters, moving forward, I want them to feel, informed, supported, and celebrated.
Yeah.
I really think that that's possible. And I think that, stuff like this, really just having the discussions, it's the reason I started doing these wisdom circles in the first, start normally in the conversation and sharing wisdom. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what do you see most commonly in your practice with women going through menopause transition, and how can acupuncture help?
Yeah, I think, again, kind of going back to where acupuncture and the traditional Chinese medicine, the medical paradigm and our approach is that it is very different. I mean, we don't use blood tests, we don't use MRIs, we don't use imaging. Um, we're looking, basically what my job as a licensed acupuncturist is to basically come up with a differential diagnosis. And what I mean when I say that is that when any individual woman walks into my office, that is going to be a completely different experience for every single person that arrives. So much of what my job is to do is, again, observe, listen to what the presenting symptoms or main complaints are. Visual is super important to me. I mean, and people always freak out sometimes when they ask me, well, like, when you're looking at me so close, what are you looking at? I'm like, well, to be totally honest, I'm looking at your eyes. I'm looking at the quality of your eyes. I'm looking at your skin tone. I'm feeling your skin tone. I'm looking at the quality of your hair. I'm watching how you walked in. I am listening to the tone in your voice. Those are all really, really telling important things. And that's not to make anybody nervous, because again, we automatically jump to like, oh, what's wrong with me? Do I look weird? And you're like, no, it's just telling me, it's giving me information. And so, those are our diagnostics. And then most importantly, whatever each individual woman is bringing to me, which brings us to what are the main things I see. I mean, it is so vast. And again, like to support what you said, depending on if a woman is in a perimenopausal state because of natural causes, because of a hysterectomy, because of chemotherapy, like this can present so differently all across the board. Past traumas, how many children they've had, are they coming into the perimenopause, into menopause in an already deficient state because they are such a type A person that they've just blown out all their energy and everything is already depleted. Like that's all going to look really different, right? So it's my job to figure out through basically an algorithm that goes through my head from observation, presentation, and then the whatever the communication is and whatever their stories are leading to, kind of develops this algorithm in my head that basically says, okay, this is going to be the best course of action. This is going to be the best treatment plan for this person right now. And again, that treatment might only happen once and then it completely changes because then the next time I see them, they present a little bit different. So that's also the difference between the Western medical system and I think the Eastern medical paradigm is that differential diagnosis is so key. It's so huge and it's so important because every human being on this planet is born with a different constitution. Nobody arrives here the same. We have a saying in Chinese medicine, we call it qi, spelled Qi, vital energy of the body. There's a lot of philosophy and a lot of history behind that. And one of them is that we have this thing called pre-heaven essence. And that's basically your DNA. That's your fingerprint. That's your ancestors. That's everything before you, right? And that's the creation of you, your parents, your grandparents, your great, your ancestors. It goes all the way back. And then we arrive, right? So then we're birthed into this world. We take our first breath, and that's what's called your post-heaven essence. You have a footprint, you have a stamp, you have a certain amount of energy that you were born with. And then as you live your life and your life lives you and you experience life, you either raise that up or you deplete it. And some of us, just depending on the choices we've made, rapidly deplete our chi, our vital energy, and our energetic potential goes way down. So any time that we go through our life, it's more difficult. It's harder because there may be like the scale's already been tipped down low, So the most common things, they're hot flashes, night sweats. I mean, those are always the first ones. The emotional stuff. I mean, that's the biggest, and that's the most like always near and dear to my heart, I think, is to experience with any woman going through the journey of anxiety, depression, not feeling themselves. I mean, I'm going to be honest to everybody that's out there listening to this. I remember so succinctly waking up one day after the worst. Like, I literally woke up in the middle of the night one night when I was smack dab in the middle of the perimenopause, and I sat straight up. My heart was beating through my chest and I screamed, and I scared my husband to death. And he was like, what, what happened? I didn't even know. I was like, I don't even know why I just did that. And then the next day I woke up and I thought, who is this? Like, I didn't even know who I was. Like, I didn't feel like me at all. And that is the most near and dear to my heart. And what I really do think that the Eastern medical paradigm has a lot to offer for those types of things, because again, medications, SSRIs, antidepressants, those are all so important. But if I mean, it's not a one all be all, that doesn't cure everything, right? There still can be a ton of anxiety, a ton of like body dissociation and things like that. So I think when we really give ourselves the opportunity to get into our bodies and experience a medicine that does connect the mind, the body, and the spirit, it can be a really beautiful thing. So
Yeah, thank you. That is there's some tender times, man. They can really be vulnerable times, right? Of that, I think of it as, the phoenix rising, like really when we're just in the ash, and just even trying to find our way through the ash of so much uncertainty. But it does change, and it has, and I have experienced working with you, and the changes that can happen. And so I really appreciate the work that you do.
thank you.
What let's see. What would I'm I mean, you sort of touched on this a little bit, but what would a treatment plan look like? Like, can you give us an example of what, for those of us who, so any of our viewers watching who are
Mhm.
not familiar, of what it would be like to have it, what would a treatment plan look like? You said
Yeah.
that sometimes it's just not, it's like a one and done, but
Mhm. Yeah, in most cases, acupuncture is never a one and done. And a treatment
I meant
plan.
plan. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So a treatment plan would basically, the initial appointment is always a much longer. Any acupuncturist is going to do a really extensive health history. So again, we have like this subset, this algorithm in our head about body temperature and, what flavors do you crave? Do you crave salty or sweet or bitter or whatever? And all these things give us so much like juicy information that confirms where we want to go. Where do you feel pain? I mean, everybody be like, I have a headache, but to us, if you have a headache here is very different than if you have a headache here. Those mean different hormonal imbalances. Those mean different organs are being affected. It's the same thing. Another part of our diagnostic tools is looking at someone's tongue and then feeling their pulse. The tongue and the pulse are confirmation for what we're already kind of putting together. So depending on the severity of the symptoms, depending on a lot of the findings, the report of findings, we basically call it, We will create a treatment plan that usually looks like the first 4 to 6 weeks is 1 to 2 times a week that you will be seen as follow-ups. You'll have your initial appointment and then follow-ups 1 to 2 times a week. And then after six weeks, then we do a big reassessment, basically on a gauge of your symptoms were here and now they're here. And again, the really important thing I think to always remember about this stuff, it's not always about eradication. It's not always about eradicating all the symptoms right now. It's about improving quality of life. It's about assessing reduction in symptoms and severity. It's about having periods of times where the symptoms aren't happening as frequently. So the duration isn't lasting as long. Those are all really, really huge. And that's what's really cool when you work with someone consistently, because then you have the ability to engage on those different steps and those milestones and share that with your clients that you're working with. Because again, we don't always recognize when we're getting better, because we always want to be better than we are, right? I want this to go away. I'm sick of this. And that's not always possible. So it's also, really great to have someone in your corner, rooting you on and saying, hey, this is where we started. And 4 weeks later, here's where we are now. So I think reassuring and that reassurance for all of us and getting in the driver's seat and being in more control of our health and well-being during the menopausal phase, that's medicine. I mean, that is medicine in itself. Just that can be so empowering for all of us. And that's why I just am such a huge fan of self-care.
Yeah, and just being heard. I mean, can I get an amen on that? Like having somebody who doesn't tell you you're crazy, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, because that's often, I mean, I was reading recently a statistic that I think it's less than 1 in 4 general practitioners in the United States have any education about menopause at all. And I think it's 30%, only 30% of residencies offer menopause medicine at all. People just don't, it's like the blind leading the blind. And
Yeah.
again, I think it's changing, but it is just, yeah, it's like there's just yeah, I love Stacey, that approach that I just was picturing you with your Sherlock Holmes hat, and I mean, why isn't there more of that? It's imagine, I was thinking of it in a crime scene where it's I'm only going to look over in this corner of the room. There's there's a bloody knife and a candlestick and a whatever, a shoe over here, but I'm just not going to look at those. So I appreciate and love that approach of doing that diagnostic. And yeah, so thanks for sharing those good nuggets.
Absolutely.
What are your, I know that you really specialize, which is sort of unique in blending the Eastern and Western paradigms. You have more knowledge probably than most about just as a hormone specialist. And so I'd love if you could share a little with us about just your thoughts on HRT and yeah.
Yeah. So definitely my specialty lies I've done a lot of I just took finished an 8-month certification on hormones but coming from a more natural approach. So again, not so I can diagnose or prescribe hormone replacement therapy or anything like that, but it's all the other things that fit in with that. So it's, nutrition, mindful movement, supplements and herbs, because a lot of times, I mean, we underestimate sometimes where we can get with those things because, ultimately hormone replacement therapy is incredibly important and it can be an absolute lifesaver. It was for me. And that's really what was the tipping point for me, was again, being diagnosed with chronic Lyme's disease, getting treated for that, and then realizing the impact. And I had no hormones. I mean, the first Dutch test that I got, they couldn't even find any testosterone in my body. So again, as women, oftentimes we don't think we have testosterone. We do. We don't produce it like men, but we still have testosterone, and it's our spicy hormone. I mean, it is what makes us like spicy and, all this stuff. And well, no wonder why I could barely get through the day, because I literally had no testosterone. And that was terrifying, but also like, well, no wonder why I feel the way I do. So I have personally chosen to go down the line of hormone replacement therapy. I've always used bioidenticals, which this is another confusing thing. And they're basically come from the same source, but bioidenticals are compounded. They're from a compound pharmacy. So they're catered to the specific person as far as the diet, how many of X, Y, and Z they're going to give you. So I've used testosterone, topical testosterone cream. I've used topical estrogen, progesterone. So at different times, I've definitely supplemented with a lot of things, but at the same time, I've also completely modified my diet. And I went into menopause thinking I kind of had it together. Like, I feel like I eat really healthy. I feel like I get this. Well, there were just certain food triggers for me personally that were causing a lot of inflammation. And that is what ultimately led to all this like chronic joint pain and muscle pain and fatigue that I was having. So, I was so mad that I had Lyme's disease and I was going through menopause at the same time, but it forced me to really pull way back on everything and reassess everything. How I moved, how I ate, how I slept, how I did everything. And so the blessing of it was that I was able to come out the other side and realize what I needed and supplement with that, as far as supplements like the basics, making sure I had enough vitamin D, fish oils, a really good multivitamin. Things like that are really, really key, because even if we're eating well, nutrient wise, our food supply is so deficient and so really lacking a lot of the basic nutrients that we need when we are going through menopause, that it is really important to work with someone who can support in that way and understand what the contraindications are of Western medicine, pharmaceuticals, hormone replacement therapy. Super important, because not everybody, I mean, if you've had certain kinds of cancer, if you have heart disease, if you have pre-existing conditions, hormone replacement therapy is not for certain people at all, without any question. But we know historically that now it's been revealed that back in the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, there was a lot of really horrible reporting and a lot of really horrible studies that were done that aren't true about hormone replacement therapy and the connection to breast cancer and other kinds of cancer. Yes, again, if you have a predisposition, it is way too risky for you to be on certain kind of hormones, because you will increase your rate of breast cancer, but that is only for certain people. And then we have to also dive on the other side and realize that all the risks that we are putting ourselves in by not paying attention to having depleted hormones, osteopenia, osteoporosis, heart disease. I mean, the list goes on, how much damage can be done to our bodies if we don't have certain hormones at all in our bodies. So it's finding the right providers, and it's finding the right information. And then it's also about making an individual choice on the pros and cons for you. How much is this affecting your life? And, and in the meantime, this is one of the biggest revelations in research with acupuncture. Acupuncture is standing at the very top as one of the best modalities to choose for hot flashes. Hands down. I mean, a lot more research needs to happen, but it is happening. And we're seeing massive results with it that are really promising. So a combination for sure. And, my experience, I spend part of my time in private practice, and then I work at the University of Minnesota Physicians. So my blended Western background is because previous to being an acupuncturist, I was working in more rehabilitation. So I was working with people with chronic disease, terminal illnesses, disabilities, things like that. So I was always very conscious and aware of I got a bachelor's in science when in my undergrad, so pathophysiology and anatomy and all that stuff. So I'd had all that education, but then really felt like this last certification that I got, I wanted to know more. I will never prescribe tests myself, Dutch test, things like that, but I will be able to look at the information clients bring me and understand from kind of a blended perspective of maybe what's going on. And then make sure that I'm referring them to my trusted team of physicians, functional medicine providers, and people that are able to prescribe things that that's required. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I blend the two together.
Yeah. Thank you. That's the thing about our Western world is menopause has become so medicalized. It's a lot. It's difficult. I mean, the endocrine system is a little can be overwhelming anyway. When we start diving in of like what hormones do what, and I mean, it's a whole other language, and so it is valuable to find people who can be your interpreter. I'm just
100%.
looking in the chat and I see that Heidi had mentioned said or told to just take RT or and move on, HRT or and move on. Like there is so much dismissing. Like I just want to acknowledge that it's like you said earlier, whether it's like birth control pills and IUD or, to just prescribe a woman as a blanket, antidepressants because she is, having body dysmorphia and anxiety during menopause is not the whole story, right? So I think it's important that we're really the generation that I think is moving to be our own advocates. We're not really just taking one-sided story of medical professionals and if somebody is telling you that like you should just take our HRT and get over it, I trust Heidi that you're going to be the one like maybe not the person for me. And I agree with you, Stacey, about you have to find what works for you. And that's part of it is it is our responsibility and our journey to find those medical practitioners that are in alignment with our lifestyle because I mean I got to be honest I don't know where I even came from but I had a lot of judgment about HRT. I thought that it was sort of like giving in or like throwing in the towel and it was unnatural and I'm telling you it is like it's not true. I believe that my perception was a lot of condition, just propaganda. And it's that judgment that is the type of, I mean, I would never judge someone else for their choosing to take it, but it's the reason I didn't take it.
Right.
And now I made the choice, honestly, as a last resort. I mean, I have also changed my lifestyle. I've changed nutrition and like my hot flashes and night sweats. And, in addition to many other things, I had to try something else and no shame about it. I have also thankfully at least for me that I am a candidate and I'm now 5 days into my HRT and nothing crazy's happened so far. But I am starting to feel a little more like myself. And for me, my intention is to, because I have been diagnosed with osteopenia, I had a wrist fracture that was really serious a year ago. Like my body was literally starting to crumble. And so um for me it's the opportunity now that I have more knowledge and opportunity to get my poor little bod back to a little more stable and then probably discontinue, though there are people who
Yeah.
continue with it too. It's whatever works for you. So
And
um
I've been off and on. Like I thought everything was fine and whatever, and then just recently went back on just a little bit, of estradiol. And so it just depends. And that was just based on this last, series of tests that I got. And that's my philosophy too. And I think any physician, if that's your goal, again, finding that provider and that team around you that's going to work with you in that capacity. Because this doesn't, I mean, medications are life-saving, they are important, and they don't have to be forever. There's a lot of options and they can be forever. There's a lot of women that basically are on HRT their whole entire lives and swear by it. And So, more power to that course as well, because again, this is up to us individually, what
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody likes to be told what to do, but it's
I
important.
don't.
Yeah, me neither. No. And it's interesting though, like I've never been offered HRT ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also know women who have desperately tried to get
Yes.
HRT and they will not. If you're still even remotely having a period, they will not often.
Mhm.
Most, a lot of clinicians will not prescribe HRT. And for some good reason, but it's always like it's just not one for all. And I think that it's important that we have an open mind and that we, I'm talking to myself as much as anyone else, and that, we recognize that we just got to keep looking. I mean, I just found, a clinician who I adore, and, it takes some work, but that's part of the work.
Yeah.
Um, we're sort of starting to get to the end here, but I just would wondering if are there any tips or tricks that you would like to share? Just sort of,
Mm.
you were describing easier. What did you call them? Juicy, so sexy, Stacey. Juicy tidbits.
Tidbits. I probably have said some of them. I mean, I would just say, the thing that always comes to my mind the most in all of this is just to really honor each of our own journeys, like finding a space to that sounds kind of wish-washy. I don't know. I would say, figure out a way
No,
to reduce.
you don't have to belittle. That's real
No,
though. I mean,
it
that's
is real. But what I
good.
really want to say is like find a way to reduce stress, find a way to honor your importance in this world, not just within your family and your family, the or the role, the person that you are, if it's you know, the mom, the whatever, the matriarch, like, you're the one holding, because that is the truth for 99% of women. They have this massive role to play. And where are we in that role individually? A lot of women are lost, and don't feel deserving or worthy of initiating time for themselves. And that is stress. I mean, that is stressful. There is only so much each of us can hold individually. So, the juicy tidbits are like, find a great acupuncturist. My gosh, I mean, of course, I'm a huge fan, but that's also not because that's what I do for a living, but that's because I'm a patient first. And that's how I became an acupuncturist. I was a patient, and it changed my life so much that I had to do it myself. And so I'm a huge believer, and I continue to get acupuncture throughout my life. It will always be a foundation for me. And so I think the juicy tidbits are, yes, like it is coming to a place and a space of just honoring our beloved, which our beloved most first and foremost is us. Like getting to know ourselves in this time in our lives is just, it's a beautiful gift, because guess what? Our tolerance for all the bullshit and the bullshit relationships, like I know everybody listening right now is going to be like, yes, it just goes way down, and we start to align, and we get authentic with who we are, and we start really being able to speak to those needs. And like, what could be better than that? So let's continue to talk about it and have these conversations that have been taboo or haven't been discussed for so long. And yeah, so I guess that's as juicy as I have right now. But find a good provider, because we still, you know our lives are just starting at this age. We can still be sexy. We can still have energy. We can still have new ideas and create new businesses and make new friends and start a new hobby. I mean, this is all possible, and it's all beautiful at any stage in our lives. So that's what I would say, is just reach out, find the support that you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a number of elder women that I know who are, post menopause mavens. And, they talk about how, the second part of your life is really about birthing yourself. It's about, you know, you've spent the first half of your life, you know, women spend it birthing, you know, children, homes, families, businesses, you know, all of these things. It's always spent so much on others. And so like I absolutely agree with you. Rest, take what you need, ask for help from for your people, ask for some compassion and some understanding and yeah, and allow yourself to like what do I want to become? What how who is this beautiful person that is emerging? You know, find the same gentleness with yourself as you would either when you were pregnant or you knew someone else that was pregnant. I mean, I think that that's really an important part of the journey of having that gentleness and compassion with ourselves and um yeah, to just slow down and be like, okay, let's let this unfold and see what happens.
Yeah.
One last thing, only because I know that we have an international audience watching today, is how what's a good way to find a practitioner in their area?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If it's international, I know that anybody who's not who's tuning in from somewhere else in the US, we have the North American Menopause Society. So you just Google North American Menopause Society, and there's a ton in there as far as articles, information, as well as providers. So providers, we're just kind of starting to jump over with more acupuncturists, and there's a lot of naturopaths on there, a lot of functional medicine physicians. Acupuncturists are starting to jump on there because again, it's just now becoming recognized that acupuncture is a really viable, really important part of that. So outside of the US, I would imagine you could probably just, instead of North American, it could be Canadian or, UK or wherever you guys are tuning in from. And then I also think that a very easy Google search is, acupuncture for women's health, acupuncture for menopause, things like that. I mean, we are in the age of just literally everything being right at our fingertips. So just Googling things like menopause, natural health care, things like that will really get you far. And then again, it's word of mouth, ask your friends. It's really surprising when you start having these conversations on how many people have sought out other providers and have developed a really good team around them. I think those are always the best resources. I'm just really upping my game. I work with patients a lot. So my boosting of my programs and my website are a little weak, but my website's going to be another resource that definitely is going to help funnel people to this new program that I'm going to be starting called Second Spring by Stacey. Second spring in Chinese medicine is menopause. It's where we're at. So, I think those are just ways to find resources.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, I would love to open up if anybody has any questions. I've been trying to watch the chat here, but if anyone wants to pop on, if they have any questions for Stacey, feel free to raise a hand or just I think you can unmute yourself. And all right. Going once,
Going twice.
twice.
I'll just echo. And Stacey was obviously because of HIPAA and everything. I've been a client of and more than that of Stacey's for a long time now, and I just could not echo enough a couple things. One, how this is such a journey, how it is not a one and done at all, how you need to check in with yourself and check in with your supportive team on what progress you're making so you can give yourself credit and give your plan credit for that. And then just to know that you're gonna have some days, it's kind of some days it's like that, two forward and one back. And don't get frustrated with it, and recognize too that, it's imperfect because we're imperfect. But you've got to do this for yourself. You you owe it to yourself because no one else is fucking gonna do it. So
Amen.
yeah, honor yourself with support.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Any other thought, Dimity? Do I see you raising your hand? I love it.
That was me. I know you have said that every it's like our faces, they're all different, but are there any sort of broad scale supplements? I know that you mentioned fish oil.
Mhm.
Are there any others in Chinese medicine that are sort of good for women of a certain age?
Yeah, there are. And again, super generic, super big. Chinese medicine is way more nuancy. So Chinese medicine is basically the average Chinese medical formula is anywhere from like between 5 and 8 to 12 different herbs that are put together to create a formula. So Chinese herbs are very nuancy, very diagnostically based. So never because literally, like, again, hot flashes for one person could require one formula, and then for the person also next to him saying I have hot flashes too would be a totally different formula. So Chinese medicine, but I would say, are you from the UK or Australia? I couldn't tell, I just heard your voice.
Australia,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I've spent a lot of time in Australia, so I definitely know in any of the major areas. I mean, there's a ton of really amazing, highly qualified providers. I'm not sure where you are, but even in some of the smaller areas outside Brisbane or Sydney or whatever. But I would say that. And then as far as the supplements go, again, I hate to say like, oh, everybody should do this, but we know now that things like vitamin D and fish oils, vitamin D acts as a hormone in our body, so, but it is important to make sure that you know where your vitamin D levels are at, if you are deficient. So a lot of that would depend on how much you would take. Fish oils are they're really good, for everything: hair, skin, nails, elasticity, all that stuff. So I don't think anybody can go wrong with fish oils, again, as long as it's a high quality and you're getting it from a good source. That's my other big take home always. Unfortunately, a lot of the generic food and supplement places don't have super high quality. And I always feel really unfortunate for people that spend a lot of money on products that just really don't end up doing anything. So, doing your research on high quality supplements is really important too. So I hope that helps a little.
Stacey, what about collagen? That's like a lot of people are really like discussing collagen these
Yeah,
days.
I mean, it's huge. And remember, depending on what if you're vegan, vegetarian, that's not going to work for you. It's a byproduct of animal. So collagen is something that absolutely 100% is now known to, help with elasticity, just connective tissue, like all kinds of things. So definitely, I mean, if, consuming animal products is part of your repertoire, then it can be a really good thing to add to a smoothie, or, they've got all these flavored ones now that you can put in your coffee and things like that. But again, always remember that these new health fads, they're never as simple and easy as we think they are. And too much of anything, and this is something I always emphasize with my clients, is like, really talk to a qualified provider about what you're taking. Because I get people that come to me and they bring me in a list that is like this long, and they're like, I'm going to be the healthiest old person there is. And then I'm like, well, what do you feel like? And they're like, well, my guts hurt and I'm constipated and I get headaches all the time. And I look at their supplements and I'm like, that is too much. Like, there's too much going on here. And the body can only digest a certain amount. And again, based on your constitution, that depends. So again, when you want to go on a journey, it's very easy, even to find a provider in your area to really help you through that and make sure you're getting good quality.
Awesome. Well, anyone else? Any other thoughts, questions? We'll wrap it up here. What a delight, Stacey. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom today. I want to thank Ariel, my dear buddy, who is just helping us tech-wise today. And our next Wisdom Circle will be on March 21st at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, featuring another dear friend and very funny lady, Kate Valentine. So please join us. And lastly, tell your stories, ask your questions, and share your wisdom. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Wisdom Circle. Mwah.